here at the Ballard Locks is a good example of observing the migration of the salmon. Now, the salmon are known as a keystone species, and that's because of where they are on the food chain, in the maritime food chain. They normally live about 6 to 8 years, depending upon the species of fish, and they hatch up in the streams, up in the base of the Cascade Mountains, all along the Cascades up into Alaska, and they remain in fresh water close to the streams that they were born in for about 1 year to 2 years, depending upon the species. Then they slowly work their way downstream. And over here at the sluice gates, you can see two types of sluice gates. And actually the narrow sluice gate that you see over there is for the salmon that are leaving the fresh water to go out to sea for the first time. And again, those salmon are about 1 to 2 years old, depending upon the species of salmon. About 5 to 6 years into the life cycle of the salmon, their DNA kicks in and they say it's time to go home. And they leave the ocean and somehow find their way to the very stream that they were born in. It took scientists years to figure that out, but finally scientists figured it out that it was by sense of smell. When they're born, salmon actually imprint the smell of that stream on their brain. Now, what gives a stream a certain smell? Whatever happens to be growing in it, whatever geologic formations, sand, rocks, stones, minerals, whatever's in there, whatever's growing on the sides of the stream, all the other living material that's inside the stream all contributes to the exact smell of that stream. And a salmon has a sensitive organ in the beak of its nose that is so sensitive it can detect fresh water when it's miles and miles and miles out to sea. And they can differentiate, they remember the smell of their stream. That's what brings them home. And they come in here to this area, which is a mix of salt water and fresh water. They find the entrance to the fish ladder. They will swim up the fish ladder into the ship canal, up into Lake Washington, and into Lake Sammamish, and then into the streams where they were born. And once they get into the fresh water, they're no longer feeding. And it is a one-way trip. They have stored just enough energy in their bodies that they have enough to get to the end of their spawning areas, spawn, and then the males and the females die. Now here's why a salmon are a keystone species. When they're out in the ocean, like I said, they're eating krill. Krill eat other krill, smaller species of krill, and those smaller species eat a plant in the ocean called phytoplankton. Now phytoplankton contributes 60% of the oxygen that we breathe, 60%. Now that becomes very important to maintain that balance of population of species in the ocean. Salmon are right in the middle of the food chain. Phytoplankton are at the beginning of the food chain. Krill are the next step in the food chain, and then above salmon you have all of the predatory species of fish and marine mammals. And all of that has to be in balance. If you throw the population of salmon out of that balance, if you over-harvest salmon, if you pollute the areas that they are breeding in, if you pollute the oceans, that can affect the salmon populations. And that can have a cascading effect up the food chain as well as down the food chain to the phytoplankton. And remember, phytoplankton account for 60% of the oxygen we breathe. So for that reason, what they eat, where they eat it, when they eat, where they spawn at the ends of these streams, and the dead and decaying bodies feed the flora and the fauna in those streams. All of a sudden, that single species of fish becomes very, very important in the ecological health of our environment, and they are called a keystone species.